Good afternoon, or whatever time it is. Thank you for joining us at the Montgomery Summit. Today, we have an exciting panel and conversation around the gaming industry. Hello, I'm Gregory Milken, Managing Partner at March Capital Partners and head of our March Gaming Fund. I'm very excited to have some experts in the field today with me to talk about the state of the gaming industry, cover the past, the present, and the future, and what we see in gaming. So I'd like to introduce them all and have them all just give a self-introduction and tell you a little bit about themselves before we jump into discussion and questions about what's happening in the industry that's so exciting right now. Peter, if you would give a little introduction and talk about your current role and position.
Sure. My name is Peter Moore, and 23 years ago, I joined the video game industry. The delights of dial-up gaming with the Sega Dreamcast, where I was president and chief operating officer, moved up to rainy Seattle to run the Xbox business for Microsoft, and then lured back down to California in 2007 to be president of EA Sports and later chief operating officer. A little bit of a hiatus the last few years from gaming over in Liverpool as the chief executive officer of Liverpool Football Club, but now proud to be a board member of Nifty Games. And my current full-time role is Senior Vice President and General Manager at Unity Technologies, in charge of sports and live entertainment.
Great. JJ.
Hi, I'm JJ from Panelists America. First of all, thank you for having me join this panel, and very nice to meet you all today. Panelists America is a U.S. subsidiary company of Prolobis, the developer and publisher of Black Desert, our flagship MMORPG. Actually, I'm not sure if everyone here is familiar with the name Prolobis or Black Desert, so I'd like to just share just a couple of more facts about the company and the Black Desert titles very quickly. So we're a fairly young company. We started at the end of 2010. We're just about 10 years old now. Black Desert is the only video game IP that we have that is live, and we've grown from 10 years ago to a public company with about 4 or 5 billion US dollars market cap now, thanks to the success of Black Desert titles. So Black Desert started as a PC MMO, released first in 2015, I think at the end of 2014. And then we released the mobile version and the console version of the game in 2018 and 2019. And last year, the gross revenue of the Black Desert franchise across all these platforms have hit 2 billion US dollars, and it's still growing. And we are also working on a couple of new MMORPG projects, not really MMORPG, AAA video game projects that I hope I can share more details soon. And yeah, it's a very exciting time for us. And I'm the head of Prolobis US office, and my team here is overseeing the live operations and marketing and PR and strategy for all the Prolobis titles for North American business. And yeah, that's it. I'm very excited to have the panel discussions today.
Thank you. Bernard?
Thanks, Gregory, so much for having me here. Love being on this esteemed panel with such great people. My name is Bernard Kim. I'm president at Zynga. Joined the company about 5 years ago. We are a company that was founded on this vision around connecting the world through games, which is something that we live and die for every single day, and we have a tremendous amount of passion around, especially in times like right now where games are just an amazing platform to connect with one another. We make games like Words with Friends, Zynga Poker, Empires and Puzzles, Merge Dragons. Peak Games are Toy Blast and Toon Blast, and then most recently, Rollic Games joined us, which has 2 of the top free games in the marketplace with High Heels and Blob Runner 3D. Yesterday, we announced a deal around buying Extra Games, which puts us in the cross-platform space in a really exciting way. And our idea and vision around the company is we're a company run by gamers. Our passion is about gaming, and we want to build a family of people that can do their best work at this company, all centered around a passion around video games. Like Peter, I've worked at other companies as well. Before joining Zynga, I spent 10 years at Electronic Arts working with Peter, and consider him a great colleague as well as mentor. So I'm really psyched to be here with all of you.
Great, thank you all. So I thought we'd start out maybe just going a little bit historical before jumping into the present and future. And I thought Peter maybe could give some perspective on the industry and what it was like, you know, in his
way back when.
And then we can talk about what it's like today.
Yeah. You know, I was fortunate to join the industry, as I say, in the late 90s. I'd come out of a career in sporting goods and was, as we all often are, called by an executive recruiter and basically said, what do you know about video games? Which wasn't a lot at the time, but the concept of gaming going online was still very early. And joining Sega to launch the Dreamcast, the world's first online device that wasn't a computer, never mind a video game console, was intriguing to me. And I coined a phrase at that time, we're going to take gamers where gaming is going. And this is, what is this, 23 years later, and here we are. But you think about what gaming was at that time, very dominated by the Segas and the Nintendos and the Sonys in the console world. Mobile gaming really yet to show its a real strength because of the devices and the capabilities, obviously. And PC gaming, still obviously the roots of our industry and still very strong, but consoles were starting to take hold. And in those days, it was the classic Japanese gaming companies that were both delivering against their arcade roots, which is what Sega was really, and certainly the Dreamcast from the perspective of, you know, the way it was built. It was on the Naomi motherboard, and so pretty much all of the games were arcade-based or arcade ports. But a phenomenal launch on 9/9/99, for those of you old enough to remember, with probably the best launch lineup that there will ever be in console games. 12 new pieces of intellectual property were launched on the platform. And you know, I think we all understand, if you follow the industry, the eventual sad fate of the Dreamcast. It didn't quite get to where it needed to be on an install base and an attach rate of software. So from that perspective, you know, the Dreamcast, I think, did some tremendous trailblazing and taught us all what online could be, and the concept of not just two people on a couch or two people perched on the end of their bed in their bedroom playing a game, but really bringing people together on a mass scale. If you then think about how the industry evolved, you had another player come in, and that was Microsoft with the original Xbox. And by this time, Sega had exited the hardware business, turned into a third-party publisher, and was starting to publish all of its games on what were previously competitive platforms. In the world of PC gaming, you know, the MMOs, RPGs were still very prevalent and very deep. It was kind of a little nerdy at that time to be an MMO player, but the concept of coming together through social gaming was born within that MMO world. You think of EverQuest in particular as those types of games that brought us all together. As we fast forwarded, the console wars began to pick up speed, and PlayStation then really was pitted for its first time against the Xbox. And so I was very fortunate to be up at Xbox leading the charge and launching the Xbox 360, which I think had picked up the mantle of online gaming. A lot of content had come from Sega to Microsoft. And what you were getting then was scale in our industry. You had two behemoths in both Microsoft and Sony that were willing to really fight for the living room, because that's what we started to talk about during that period. And I'm talking 2005, 2006. Being at Microsoft, it was very clear that if we weren't a committed player in video gaming, at that point, there was concern that we would, quote unquote, lose the living room. Sony was coming in, and certainly a hardware player, unparalleled in the world at that time, with obviously televisions. They were still very big in the phone business, musical devices, amps, everything that was powering your home entertainment. And Microsoft was concerned that if they let gaming go, that Sony would dominate the living room, as Microsoft was seeing more and more, particularly with high definition coming, more and more movement away from the office, away from your bedroom into the living room. As we look at gaming then, we started to see mobile gaming as the devices became more powerful. The interactions you could have with your device became easier. We were no longer looking at punching directions on a keyboard. We could actually use our fingers when the first iPhones came along. And so we were then had this kind of triple play of consoles, PC, and mobile really starting to gravitate. At the same time, online gaming networks, Xbox Live, the PlayStation Network, were all coming to their fore and starting to really aggregate the power of gamers coming together and not just playing against each other, but playing, as I said, against millions of people. A little bit of a laggard was Nintendo at that time, and Nintendo was having either success or relative failure, with depending on what period it was, with GameCubes and Wii's, and of course now obviously back in their success mode with the Switch, as we know. But I was able to be part of that incredible industry growth spurt, particularly when I arrived at Electronic Arts. And then you saw the real movement away, and BK was integral in this, away from, in EA's case and in all publishers' cases, if you wanted to survive, being a manufacturer of discs that would then sell them to retailers, you know, close their doors of the dev studio for 2 weeks, send them all to the beach, and then come back and then ship another game the following year. We started to move very, very distinctly into being a network company that was putting game experiences on top of that network. And I think the most crucial thing for Electronic Arts was to focus on the gamer as the customer rather than a Best Buy or a Walmart or a GameStop. And whilst they were still doing business with those retailers and still do business with those retailers, there was a distinctive shift in mentality and focus towards the gamer, the mentality of gamer first. And so I think what we saw then was a quantum shift that then exploded. And then the growth of Asian companies coming over, the types of content that was coming through, much more mature content was coming through. And then games as a live service, games that were alive 24/7, games that were updated on a daily basis. And we come to where we are today in a vibrant, creative medium that dominates film, television, music. And the last 12 months, for better or worse, game has exploded as we've all been stuck at home. And so gamers have had even more time to game, and people who didn't game have picked up their phone, picked up their tablet, gone and got a console, found ways to use their PC differently, and all of a sudden we have hundreds of millions of new gamers. That's the history over a quarter of a century. Over to you, PK.
Actually, I'd like to pick up on something you talked about there, and sort of the shift to the gamer as the key customer. And one of the things that's really interesting to me today is, billions of people across the world are gamers. But what people think of as a gamer is very different in how people play and engage with games and what they want. And some people who we classify as gamers wouldn't even call themselves gamers. So I'd really like to hear from JJ and from Bernard about how you think about who your customers are, what sort of buckets they fall in for you as players, gamers, and and how they might be similar or different.
JJ, do you want to start up?
Yeah, I can go first. Actually, I wanted to hear your perspective first, but anyways, it doesn't matter.
I can go first. Yeah, so when it comes to Zynga, we don't really segment specific demographics. We go after pretty much everyone. We are really lucky to work in a portfolio company with multiple different companies that are part of Zynga that are across multiple different genres. So some people that play our games might not even consider themselves gamers. We've actually done studies with some of our players that have said, hey, we're not gamers. And then we get on their phone and we see that they're playing Words with Friends. And they're like, oh, that's a board game. That's something that's just, I play with my friends. So it's one of these really exciting spaces around, the holy grail for us is going after players that normally wouldn't think of themselves as gamers, but then getting really deep in experience, meeting new people, getting very close with a guild of people that are going all after the same thing, and really going deep, almost as if you're a hardcore gamer in a casual experience. If you play one of our games, Toon Blast, super fun, really easy to learn, difficult to master, but you actually can build incredible friendships, and you're playing every single day because you're meeting a bunch of new friends that are doing the same things in a really safe and fun environment. So, I'm really excited about the way that our industry can shift and change. And Peter gave an incredible overview over the last 25 years, but I think the last 3 years have been the most exciting with regards to ubiquity of gaming, the understanding of the social nature of it, and then not really thinking of it as a platform play. It's just being where players are. And so that's, I think, where the most exciting time period for the future for us sits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I also agree with, what actually Peter, talked about for the last, 10, 15, 20 years, experience. And also, Bernard's points about the last, couple of years, changes in the market. And probably we are in a little different place in terms of, target gamers, because, we're very much focused on AAA MMO development. So, our game Black Desert is actually a very hardcore MMORPG. So I guess we're still more, kind of very hardcore targeting company, but it really doesn't mean that we're just pursuing that segment, because as Peter said, we also have our games on mobile platforms, for example, actually on console platforms, not just only on PC. And also, we are servicing our games in all different countries. So basically, actually, we're localizing the game to all, over, 10 different languages, and servicing in over, 100 countries all over the world, in across all the platforms, PC, consoles, and mobile. That actually gives us pretty big picture about, how these different, dynamics actually go on across the regions and platforms, and also, demographically, in terms of where we should go, who we should target. And even for a hardcore MMORPG like Black Desert, sometimes we see actually more female players are playing on mobile. I think that's more, a trend. I think when we think about, mobile games, definitely there are more female users who would think actually they are a gamer on mobile platform more comfortably. And also, if you have the right technology, whether it's like in a shooter or MMORPG or just in a casual game, regardless of the genre, I think definitely you can really reach out to, broader audience across the platforms, because now people, kids start, using their, phone devices or, iPads actually when they're like 3, 4 years old, or even younger. And even my mom, who is in, in her 70s, she's also playing games on mobile phones. So things kind of sound crazy. So as Peter, pointed out, now everybody is kind of a gamer. I think they're also getting more and more familiar with the game technologies and devices. So once you have the right technology, right game design, I think, you definitely have to, think about just the right targets, thinking that everyone, in the world actually can be your target segment. So for example, we are also, working on, one of our new projects that is also targeting like a broader audience. It's an MMORPG, but it's also, collectible MMO. So we think actually a lot of, kids or, teens, or even, um, older generations can also enjoy this type of, MMORPGs, just interacting with other people. So I don't think actually really just genre-wise, video game companies can, have to limit themselves into a certain segment anymore. Of course, still, I think Black Desert is really seeing, more kind of hardcore and very typical hardcore target segment, like 18 to 34 male players. But again, I don't think actually we are also, we are not really limiting us to that certain segment, because now across the regions, across the platforms, and across all the devices, we see more and more opportunities coming up to be able to embrace more audience. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'd also like to, sort of visit the definition of how we think about beyond just gamers and who they are, but what a game is. And I think those, what people think a game is has changed a lot in the recent years. And I don't know how much you can tell us, Peter, but I'd be curious for your perspective on like your current role isn't specifically a gaming role, but it's at Unity. And how does your past experience in gaming play into how you think about the future for entertainment?
I think it's a great question, Gregory. And so my role is focused right now on sports and live entertainment. Unity, of course, in its roots, a mobile gaming platform, but has seen the opportunity to bring gaming technology and the unbelievable innovations that the entire gaming industry has brought to entertainment to life in different industries, in different segments. And so certainly at Unity, whilst 71% of all mobile games in the last quarter were developed on the Unity platform. We think about the world of real-time 3D and everything we've learned in gaming. Again, I go back to the late 90s where we were trying to figure out how to get a game to play on 56K dial-up modem and make it smooth at 30 frames per second, which, as I always say, was great till your mom picked up the phone in the other room and completely disconnected you from that game at that time. But what we think about at Unity now is the art of creativity. And nothing is more central to creativity, I think, in any medium in the world right now than gaming. And everything we have learned as an industry, every company can't say everything we're doing is we built from scratch ourselves. We've all iterated on the brilliance of game developers and people in gaming technology, all the way back to the Apple II and the Commodore 64 and in television. And we've iterated, we've made it faster, we've made it smoother. We've improved the graphics, we've improved the sociability. And what you then see are gaming platforms, ourselves, obviously, our good friends at Epic and the Unreal Engine, everything that, and Zynga themselves, when I think of what Zynga has done to reinvent itself after the last 4 or 5 years and to democratize gaming and make everybody a gamer because it's so simple to pick up and play a Zynga game and get deeply immersed in it. And then, of course, the brilliance is how do you make money out of that comes next. How do you build an economic engine that will drive revenue so you have enough money to make more games? But I think what we're doing, what other companies are doing, is actually promoting everything that gaming has given to this world over the last 20 to 30 years, and then spreading that technology, in our case, automotive, construction, architecture. And what I'm looking at long term is what we can do to take gaming technology to improve the way we view sports and to improve the way, for example, that we can go to a concert. Do we really want to go to a concert right now with 20,000 strangers all packed in shoulder to shoulder? No, we don't. But as the way of virtualizing that experience and actually creating a 24/7, as we do brilliantly in gaming, experience, rather than go to a concert, go enjoy the artist for 2 hours and then forget about them for 6 weeks. And so that kind of thing, I think, is what gaming is about. It's the same stuff that I'm also doing as a board member at Nifty Games, which is how do we democratize the gaming experience? And in the case of what Nifty is doing with both its NFL Clash game and its NBA Clash game is taking a Clash Royale mechanic, if you like, and a card mechanic and making that game incredibly easy to jump into and superbly hard to be really, really, really good at. And you've got to really do as you do in Clash. You've got to focus. You've got to make sure you're making the right decisions. It's very strategic, but applying that to a sports genre. So again, this iteration on great ideas, we come through and games get better and we borrow ideas from each other. And that's where we're at, I think, today in gaming. Not only just gaming, but we're changing the world.
Awesome, thanks. So one of the things I'd like to talk about, is partly a function of the last year in COVID, but, is inherent in gaming is games being social. And I think there's been a greater awareness, acceptance that gaming is a social activity that brings people together. And so I'd be curious to hear, your perspectives, either Bernard or JJ, on how integral social is to the experiences that your companies build, whether it's a necessity, in this world going forward. I think it's interesting that almost everybody seems to want multiplayer or a social experience within their games. But we have seen some pushback recently, in terms of Sony really investing in single player story content games. And I think even more recently at EA, where there's been the pushback from BioWare to make Dragon Age 4 a single player game with no multiplayer experience, which come through the news recently. So curious about how that plays out in your companies in terms of, is social multiplayer a necessity for what you do?
I mean, maybe I'll start. For Zynga, we're a company that was founded on a social gaming platform, and that is part of our DNA. Peter mentioned the last 5 years of Zynga's turnaround, but I think the really amazing part about the company was it's actually a really awesome company. Before Frank and I joined about 5 years ago. I think one of the things that we did do was we kind of reset putting players in the center of decision making, helping prioritize this passionate, really exciting organization around putting players first and then delivering against needs of those players. That started with live services and offering bold beats within Zynga Poker that players really kind of wrapped their arms around and loved, or in Words with Friends, introducing different types of ways, not only to play with friends, but also alone. Like, who would have ever thought that you could actually play Words with Friends alone? And now we have an entire single player experience in that title, built around Season Pass. So it's a really exciting evolution of the company. But the ingredients going forward really center around that social loop. And the last 12 months have fortified that vision and that decision making. I think it's, I think a lot of companies could have responded a lot of different ways. I'm so proud of the way that the Zynga organization has kind of embraced this opportunity around delivering really great moments of escape to players, and then offering social connectivity that people needed so desperately. And now I think it's become kind of human nature. Like, my kids are always communicating on Discord right now. Like, if it weren't for Discord, I don't think my kids would be connecting with a lot of people, and it's so essential. And now, looking into the future, we believe ubiquity across platform, but social connectivity is the key ingredient around what makes these games fun, exciting, connected, but also competitive.
Yeah, I agree with Bernard. I think actually social connectivity is really key for most of the video games these days. And I don't think a single player game really ignore that, because I think usually when we think about social connectivity, I think people just talk about interactions in game. But I think actually video games, fundamentally, I think they really encourage people to interact with each other, because when you play a single player game, still I think they form kind of community with other players, just talking about it, how actually they do things, actually how they solve the certain problems in the game. So basically, when I think about game, any kind of entertainment form that asks you to solve a problem through competition or collaboration with others is a game. So in a way, I think a lot of businesses are already doing a game business, because they really want to use people's psychology, where people kind of have to compete with each other or have to collaborate with each other. So basically, I think because I'm originally from South Korea, so when I first started playing games, like real games, not of course, arcade games are also games, but I actually started playing games like, StarCraft, or actually, Diablo and Diablo 2. And, that was actually when I was in a college. So at that time, also a lot of, first generation Korean game companies actually started developing, MMORPGs and mostly online games. So everything just started online and, kind of social game format to me. So I really haven't, played a lot of single player game when I was growing up in South Korea. So basically, when I think a lot of Asian companies think of games and video games, I think they think this like a social connectivity as the core. And I think maybe also that's why in a lot of like a Korean or Asian companies are also kind of good at the live game services. I'm not sure, now how much people are going to agree with this, but I think because actually they really want to put social connectivity and the social component of the game in the core of the game design. I think probably that also was reflected in their live game strategies and day-to-day life operations. So I think definitely we just have to think about this like a social connectivity, and also people's interaction, whether should we make players compete with each other, or they collaborate with each other. I think it really kind of something that connects people and keep them stay in the game. But also even for a single player game, because actually we on the opposite side, we were always focusing on like MMO and MMO experience, where all the players just play the games together, fighting each other, collaborating each other. And then now we hear more from the Western players that, oh, should we want a single player mode? I don't think actually that's really something like, hey, actually we don't want to interact with each other, but more like there are different type of entertainment forms. I think sometimes people really want to focus on problem solving stage, just going through the storyline. They also just do something fun just by themselves. But as I said, I think in a way, still, I think people still, like to interact with other players outside of the game, just talking about their strategies, how fast should they complete the game. I think definitely all the video games have that social component in the game and outside of the game. So yeah, I actually used to talk about games as a community philosophy to me, because I think games is really a form of community to me, whether it encourages people form a community in game or outside a game, just talking about their hobbies or their favorite games with each other. So in that sense, I think it definitely social connectivity is really the key in the video game industry these days. Of course, I think it was always like this before, but now I think people really talk about it more and watch the trend more because of the COVID situation, where more people just stay home and playing games and interacting more with each other in game and or outside a game, just talking about it. But I think it's been always like this, and I think now actually it's going to be more and more important.
Thank you. So COVID may have, but also we've seen in the past year, couple of years, lots of activity in the gaming industry. I'd say particularly on the investment and the acquisition side. Having you all as leaders and experts in the field, I'm curious to hear your perspective on, do you think this is going to continue for the next couple of years? Are we seeing consolidation and lots of acquisition and studios being continually snapped up? Or do you think this was just sort of a trend that was driven by COVID or other factors and gaming coming into its own? Do you think that this pace of acquisition and money in the space is going to continue?
Well, let me give that one a go, Gregory. I think what's happened, obviously, I think we're all involved in the industry. We've seen how the values of gaming companies have risen enormously in the last 12 months as investors and people, analysts have recognized, the power of gaming during a period that we've gone through and we continue to go through. And I think the smart gaming companies have started to use their balance sheets whilst they can to be able to consolidate their position within a growth industry, to look at companies that give them strength where they have weakness, to look at opportunities to grow in other areas other than just plain old let's go buy a studio. I also think you're seeing a little bit of acqui-hire in which there is, there's not developers hanging on every street corner that are AAA developers, and game studios and companies that have tremendous developer talent are being snapped up as much for the talent as they are for any intellectual property they may have. On top of that, you're looking at, because we're online, because we're social, you're looking at so many startup companies that are coming through with innovative technologies, and you get into the classic, do I build what they're doing right now, or do I go buy them? And again, with balance sheets as healthy as they currently are, despite the downturn in the market over the last few days, I think you're seeing companies decide to use their balance sheets accordingly and continue to, beef up for the next phase of growth over the next 2 to 3 years. And we've seen that in our industry for 30 odd years, where you have these periods where you go snap up. It's not necessarily consolidation because the industry continues to grow, organically. So, one studio goes, there's another one that pops in its place. I also think the amount of talent out there now is exponentially more so than when I joined the industry. Computer science degrees in computer gaming, bachelor's, master's degrees, we are churning out on a global basis a tremendous amount of talent. And so I think that's what you're seeing in the marketplace right now. BK's former employer, very active in the last few months, and maybe papering over the cracks of some weaknesses in their overall portfolio when you think about what they're doing with both Codemasters and Glue Mobile. So, and healthy balance sheet allows you to do that.
Yeah, I'll second Peter's comments. A healthy balance sheet definitely helps. At Zynga, we have a pretty healthy balance sheet. We have about $1.57 billion in cash right now. Over the last 5 years, we've purchased 7 companies, but I guess you can consider us a consolidator, but it's not really like that. It's really just around expanding the family. And like first and foremost, it centers around culture, passion, excitement around gaming, and then figuring out the rest of it is relatively easy. You mentioned the last 12 months. I actually think it's been a really nice accelerant with regards to expanding families. Yeah, like it's tough. I mean, the last 12 months have been tough for everyone personally, professionally. Like I think we've all had to adapt to a different way of working and interacting with one another. But I do think that it's definitely a lot more fun to do it with others than going at it alone. And we're kind of excited. We bought 3 companies relatively recently, and primarily that's driven around, hey, culturally, do we match? Are we excited about the software? Are we excited about the future? But then, like, maybe it'll be more fun doing it together versus, if a company's going at it alone every single day. And one thing about the companies that profile-wise, the companies that we've ended up acquiring, they've all kind of had ups and downs. And this is a dynamic space. Not every single day is up and to the right. A lot of the companies that we've purchased have had rock bottom moments. And Zynga's had rock bottom moments as well. So, when you can kind of recognize that, you felt it, and then you see this horizon in the future that can deal with a little bit of the roller coaster of the dynamic nature of live service gaming. I think it's a lot more fun to do it as a larger family. I love the consolidation trend that's happening. I think it's something that's really exciting, but I think it will end up servicing players better with just tighter and more fun things to do in games.
Yeah, I also completely agree with both gentlemen. So we are actually fairly new in this space in terms of M&A or investment, but I think so to your question, Gregory, I think my answer is also yes. I think actually the trend is going to probably continue. I don't think it's something just temporary, just fueled by COVID, because especially in a very dynamic landscape in video game industries, I think it's really hard for any video game company just to solely rely on organic growth. So of course, I think until a certain point, you can just grow up on whatever you built up on, and then keep just doing whatever you're doing. But it's hard, as we just talked about, there are more and more opportunities all across the world, and also across different platforms and different technologies. So sometimes you really just have to think about better strategies to outgrow. And I think that's also one of the reasons we also acquired CCP Games, the developers of EVE Online. And behind that, actually, we also had to think about how much how fast actually we can also build great new IPs, and also how we can develop newer technologies or develop more capabilities to cover different markets. And as a South Korean based company, we also thought, yeah, if we have more families in the Western markets, and also we have families and friends actually who can help us with other segments or other platforms, then it's definitely helpful. So definitely, I think these investments or acquisitions are very valuable tools for any business who aspires to grow more globally, and just working on more technologies and more newer IPs. And we are also working on that front.
So in form of industry growth, I'd like to talk a bit about opinions or thoughts on some of the larger tech companies who have had trouble in this space. So maybe starting with Amazon, who have, canceled a game, I think unreleased a game, and delayed a game multiple times, but are still very much, saying that they're in development as a game studio, basically, in developing games. So I'm curious, on your perspective, do you think that Amazon will be relevant as a top tier game studio if we looked at the time horizon of 3 to 5 years? Do you think they're going to be able to figure this out and be successful?
Making games is hard. Let's just start there. Making great games is even harder. making great games that make money is even harder on top of that. And I think that's what you're seeing. And to make great games, you need to build a creative culture. You can have all of the infrastructure, you can have all of the money in the world. And the two companies you mentioned probably have a good portion of the money in the world right now. But building a creative culture that understands what it takes to make great games, the magic dust that is the difference between a mediocre game and a great game, it takes almost generations to do. And you look at the companies that have sustained over the years, whether it's the Zyngas in the mobile space, the EAs, the Activisions, the Ubisoft in the console space, and it is always ups and downs. And I think the only thing I would say to both Google and Amazon, you've got to stick with it, and you've got to, it's a roller coaster. It is absolutely a roller coaster. And Bernard and I were at EA when I don't know, our stock was at $11.86. And, you know, it was a difficult time, but you have to persevere. You continue to invest in your studios, in your executive producers' creativity, and eventually things will come through. But I'm surprised. I know they haven't given up, but I'm surprised that they kind of thrown the towels in selectively a little earlier here. But it just, you know, it's very simple. It is a hard industry to be great at.
So curious, like Amazon is still in it, you know, they've had troubles, but it seems like they're still working on it. But Google seems to have shut down and given up in a sense. Do you think Google's thrown in the towel too quickly?
Well, I think certain companies look at where can we play in the game space. Look, Google makes billions out of gaming, billions, right? And so, right. Do you need, you know? And again, we can go back, those of us in the industry, and look at the best example is often Disney. When I first started, there was Disney Interactive, and they were in San Rafael, California, and they were making games. And all of a sudden, then for a period, they're licensing games, and then they're making games again, and then they get out of the game making thing. So this constant flow of one of the world's biggest companies and one of the world's biggest entertainment companies, proving that even with owning the IP and even having the resources that Disney had, they said, you know what, it's better to give it to the experts and to be able to license our IP to them and go from there. Lucas was another great example. And BK, you remember Lucas Interact, you know, they would be making games as well, but they decided to license. So in answer to your question, Gregory,
a Star Wars game now, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what goes around comes around in the end, but consistently, like the great companies have been able to do. Amazon makes a ton of money in gaming. Google makes a fortune in gaming, whether it's through, you know, the Android platform or whether it's delivering back-end infrastructure. You know, but maybe the really tough part, the tip of the spear, it is not something they're built to do right now. And that's just my personal opinion as somebody looking in from the outside. JJ and BK may have a different view, but you know, making great games is hard.
I totally agree. I would say that gaming is not for the faint of heart. You might have to ram your head up against a brick wall multiple times. You have to fail multiple times. As you look at most of the hit games on mobile devices right now, including Zynga's hit games, these teams have failed before they've had their breakout hit. And learning from those failures, I think, is the most valuable lessons. I think when it comes to managing resources around it, like these trillion-dollar companies are doing, they have to be resilient and patient and know that it's going to lead to several failures with MVPs to then find your moment. And you know, I do think the rarest commodity in video games really centers around great talent. You know, if you look at some of these companies that are based in Finland, and we have two of them as well, you have these ideas around 5 or 6 people that created a game that's a multi-billion-dollar franchise. And companies will say, hey, I can duplicate that. I have more than 5 or 6 people. Let's just find 5 or 6 people and go have them go after building a mobile game in 3 months. But it's those 5 people that work well together, that have a dynamic and history together. That's what sets it apart. Just the idea of numbers isn't what does it. It's that magic. Finding the right people at the right time, the right level of passion, and then launching games. That is also not for the faint of heart. It requires investment. It requires time and energy. It sometimes requires big intellectual property, and you do need a sprinkling of luck as well. So all of those things need to come together, and you have to be kind of patient through sometimes a 10-year journey to get there.
I totally agree, yeah, with you guys. I think I probably don't want to say, tech giants are failing at game business, because if you just want to look at other video game companies, like a small, big, who really wanted to build AAA titles like them, I think mostly, it looks like actually they are kind of failing, especially at the first trials and second trials. And even us in Prolabis, the development team was just only working on Black Desert, only one game for the first 5 years, since the company's foundation. A lot of people said, oh, they're gonna die. I think really perseverance really matter here. There are a lot of iterations, there are a lot of ups and downs. Usually a lot of game studios really just don't make a great game at their first trial. So I think it's really very complicated process. You just have to move on with a lot of efforts. I always think making really great game is like performing a very good orchestra, like symphony orchestra. You have so many different musical instruments, and actually you have actually those people in all different places, and then still actually you need a very, very good composer to have a very great music to play around, and then you need a very, very good producers who can actually orchestrate everything. And still, if everything technically is perfectly works well, still if one musical instrument doesn't make a little weird sound, then it kind of ruins the whole thing. It can really ruin the entire performance. So I think really there are so many different things that you have to coordinate all throughout the process, from A to Z. So I think, and also creativity, I think still you also have to keep building on very creative environment. So I think it's really just naturally a very, very tough job. So yeah, it's just tough. So I agree with that too.
One more thing I'd like to add is sometimes those dark moments before the light, those can be the most fun times working at a games company. It's where you bond with your colleagues. Peter mentioned at one point when we worked together, the stock at EA was at $11. And I actually view that as the most fun time to be at the company. Between Peter, Frank, John, I mean, we just had such a good time because a lot of companies had counted us out. The industry may have even counted us out. And we sat in a proverbial engine room and just grinded out questions and just solved problems. And sometimes when things are going badly, it all starts snowballing. And we kind of had those moments where wow, we can't do anything right. I think we won this award like worst company in America 2 years in a row. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of emerged from that. And then when things start going really well, it starts having this really positive snowball effect. And I think the thing that we're doing at Zynga, we kind of had these dark moments as well as a company. And now things are kind of snowballing into this positive momentum story. We're putting all chips in again. We're heavy in the hunt in acquisition. We're going to be launching new hit games like Star Wars that we announced on the Nintendo Switch recently. We're not going to slow down, and that's like the really exciting time when things start really moving in the right direction. It could be a really great moment to double down and have even more fun.
Great. So we don't have too much time left, but I kind of want to give you all the opportunity to share maybe one or two things that you're excited about in the near future, whether it's technology, business model innovation, games you're looking at doing, platforms, or anything general across trends in the gaming industry that you think is really exciting for the next couple of years that you're looking forward to.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I mean, certainly my entree back into gaming after a few years away was being lured to be a board member at Nifty Games. And why? Because I saw this interesting intersection between sports games, which are not easy, and are not cheap either because of the licensing agreements, the mobile platform, and an interesting gaming mechanic, which is the clash mechanic. And so what Nifty and John Middleton and his team are doing is this classic democratization of gaming, in which you're bringing everybody together through a different medium, which is sports itself. And certainly the NFL and the NBA from a US perspective, with the NFL, NBA on a global basis, gives you a great entree. Everybody loves both of those sports if you're in sports and living in North America primarily. But the ability for you to get into these games are easy. I mean, I look at my history in sports games, which goes back to Sega Sports 2K in 1999, and the original 2K line, which then Sega sold obviously to Take-Two. But I developed 2K. We named it 2K because of the Y2K computer glitch, because we couldn't think of another name. And so, 21 years later, we're making sports games easier. At EA, you needed to be pretty good at games to play Madden and to win at Madden. And whilst millions of people are, it was never an easy pick up and play type of game. Same with FIFA. And so I'm delighted to see that, in line with the growth of our industry, in line with the huge outreach our industry is making to just about every demographic, that we've got games to match and games to engage and games to keep people. Because my only fear a little bit, Gregory, is that when things get back to normal, we will see a little bit of a drop off in engagement in gaming. And what I don't want us to do is lose those people back to their real world that we brought into gaming. And as a result, I think games like what I'm seeing at Nifty are the types of games that keep people. They're sticky, they're fun, they're 5 minutes of your life you can pick up 4 or 5 times a day, which I do. And and nobody better at this than BK, of playing 58 games all day long, and as he did at EA, and keeping them all and being top of the tournament ladder in every single one of them. So I'm excited about the future of gaming. I'm excited about the growth of the demographic that we're reaching. This is no longer boys in their bedrooms. This is anybody that's got fingers and thumbs and a piece of glass that's got a CPU and a GPU attached to it. And that's what a gamer is today.
Love it, Peter. Maybe I'll go next. At Zynga, we're really just excited around being where gamers are. And we tried to focus the company on mobile about 5 years ago, and the idea was, like, let's do fewer things but do it better. And now we're in this moment where players have told us they believe in ubiquity across platforms. They want to play on multiple different screens throughout the day, and some moments are different than other moments. Sometimes you might be one-handed drinking a cup of coffee. Other moments you want to be fully immersed. And so we want to be where gamers are, and we want to be on those devices where gamers are playing. Peter mentioned kind of how many games I generally play on a day-to-day basis. I've actually now moved more towards fewer and deeper experiences. So my daily passion is really a game called Harry Potter Puzzles and Spells from Zynga. And when you think of the genre, it's probably not a game that I would have thought I would be playing 3 to 4 hours a day. But I'm leading a guild in this game called Chicken and Quaffles. And I've actually learned a lot about kind of business management, how to motivate people by working through 30 individuals who I met online. And our quest every single week is to be in the top guild in the world. And it's a super, super fun experience, but I never thought I would be playing a match 3 puzzle game, multiple hours every single day, where I have to charge my phone multiple times. I actually took a session during this conversation. I played a quick puzzle. So I mean, that's like, this is this kind of thing where you, like, wow, if you had told me 5 years ago that you'd be like so deep into a match 3 game, I probably wouldn't believe you. But this is the market, and this is the exciting part, where you can expand interactive software with players that you didn't think you would originally target. So it's an exciting time period to be in games. The golden age is coming.
You played Bejeweled Blitz all day long. Don't tell me you weren't playing Match 3 games 5 years ago. Don't tell me that.
That's a competitive 60-second experience. That's more in line with what I'm doing, not
You're
like
talking about Match 3 games, the original Match 3 game, Bejeweled.
that is true. That is true.
Do we still
JJ,
have
what are
time?
you excited about?
Like a Harry Potter experience.
Is it okay if I add, yeah.
Yeah, what are you excited
Mhm.
about for the next few years?
Yeah, there are a lot of things actually I'm excited about, and I'm watching, trends for, like a cloud gaming, multi-platform or cross-platform strategies or technologies, and AR, VR as well. Actually that agenda actually has appeared like it's a hottest topic, and then now not really, but I think there are going to be more discussion about those as well. But if I also have to pick, one of the things I'm watching for the next few years is, I'm not sure how to put this properly, but kind of video games as a streaming content, because I think these days, whether your game is for esports or not, I think now you kind of have to think about how to grow your game's viewership on Twitch or YouTube or any other game streaming platforms, not just a player base itself, because these games and those video gaming streaming community also act as like a marketing and PR channels, and also new user acquisition channels for your games. So I think it's really a big part of the community management and marketing strategy as well. So yeah, I'm very interested in how also the so-called influencer market landscape is gonna shape in the future, and also how actually video game companies can take advantage of it better in the next couple of years, because I think that space is changing really quickly. A lot of kids are just streaming the games all the time or watching video games all the time, not really playing more. So that's something I'm very interested in for the next couple of years.
Thank you all. So I think we've officially gone over our time. I apologize to the people who submitted questions. We just had so much to talk about that we didn't quite get to your questions, but thank you for joining us. On behalf of Montgomery Summit, March Capital, March Gaming, and all of us, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, JJ. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Bernard. It's been a great discussion, and we really appreciate you taking the hour to talk with us about the gaming industry. Hope everyone else enjoys the rest of their day and in the rest of the Montgomery Summit. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.